All right, welcome back to the channel again, ladies and gentlemen. Thank y'all so much for coming over, man. It's been a while since I've done a reaction to Mr. Ballin, but here we are. This brother's over 10 million subscribers now. Shout out to him. This pop star is evil. That's what the title of the video says. Again, man, if you guys aren't subscribed to him, please do so. Make sure you guys are liking and sharing. Trying to get back to these videos, you know, these be long videos, so I'm trying not to pause so much. All right, so we ain't gonna waste no more time. Let's jump right into it.
Today, I'm going to... One morning in October of 2015, a receptionist sat at her desk at a sports medicine center in Birmingham, Alabama, and scrolled through her boss's upcoming surgery schedule on her computer. The receptionist worked for a famous orthopedic surgeon named Dr. James Andrews, and because of his notoriety, his schedule was typically packed. And so her job, for the most part, was just to go through his schedule all the time and make sure nothing conflicted. And so as this receptionist scrolled through the schedule, she saw that over the next couple of days that Dr. Andrews did have several surgeries and there actually didn't appear to be any conflicts. And so she began moving on to the next part of her job, which was to alert upcoming surgery patients about their upcoming surgery and to make sure that all their information and the timing of the procedure were all in line with whatever they were expecting. And so the next person up to get surgery by Dr. Andrews was this minor league baseball player whose name was Brady Feigl, and he was having an elbow surgery, and he was supposed to come in the following morning. So the receptionist called the number on file for Brady, but it actually wasn't Brady's phone number. It was Brady's baseball team's athletic trainer. And so, this guy picks up the phone and the receptionist says, "Hey, just so you know, Brady has a surgery tomorrow morning. It's his elbow surgery. Just trying to confirm the details and make sure he understands what he needs to do to prep for it, etc., etc." And so after she ran through her spiel, the trainer just kind of paused for a second and there was silence on the line. And then the trainer said to the receptionist, there's got to be a mistake here because Brady already had that surgery. He said Brady had gotten it done 6 months earlier, and as a result of the surgery, had to sit out basically the entire baseball season. So there was no mistaking it. He had had the surgery, it was done. But the receptionist, as she's hearing this, she's like, no, that doesn't make any sense. Because the receptionist actually remembered Brady Feigl. He had come in recently for his consultation for this elbow surgery, and he was a really unique looking guy. I mean, he's 6'4", he had bright red hair, a big beard, and also he is a professional baseball player. Like, this is a unique guy that's coming in for a unique surgery that's related to baseball. And so the receptionist is like, no, he came in recently for his consultation. He still needs the surgery, I'm sure of it. And so what ended up happening next is the receptionist and the trainer started going back and forth, kind of trying to describe Brady Feigl to make sure they both were talking about the same person. But of course they were, because how many 6'4", professional baseball player pitchers with this particular elbow problem that were coming to this clinic for an elbow surgery were there? This had to be the same guy. But how could they both be right? That the trainer's saying, well, my Brady Feigl already got it done. And the receptionist is like, no, he's scheduled to come in tomorrow because I had a consultation with him a couple of days ago. They couldn't both be right. But they couldn't understand how this could be possible.
It's crazy.
But the explanation for this that they did eventually figure out, you just have to see to believe. It would turn out the receptionist and the trainer were both right. Dr. James Andrews was scheduled to perform an elbow surgery on a 6'4", red-haired, big-bearded minor league pitcher named Brady Feigl the following morning. And Dr. James Andrews had also performed the same surgery on another 6'4", red-haired, big-bearded Brady Feigl, who also was a minor league baseball player, also a pitcher, who hurt his elbow months earlier. There were literally two Brady Feigls that didn't know each other, that looked the same, did the same sort of really unique job, minor league baseball player, that also went to the same clinic to get the same surgery at roughly the same time. But somehow or another, the clinic put the wrong contact information for the wrong Brady. And so the guy who was supposed to get surgery the next day, they accidentally put in the contact info for the other Brady Feigl because they confused them, because they look exactly the same and they have the same name and they're getting the same surgery. So you can see how the mistake happened. And so it was not until this surgery mix-up that the two Brady Feigls learned the other existed. They did not know each other. And when they met each other,
Hold on.
And so it was not until this surgery mix-up that the two Brady Feigls.
No, man. I mean, you can see the difference. You know, the it's not only the beard, but the way they actually have it cut and the glasses that making them look alike and the nose too. The same name.
Learned the other existed. They did not know each other. And when they met each other, I mean, they're spitting images of each other and they do the same job and they have the same issue with their elbow. I mean, it was like this incredible coincidence. But believe it or not, they did do a DNA test because they're thinking we've got to be related, right? Nope, they're not related.
Dang.
They are just absolutely perfect doppelgangers.
That's crazy right there, man.
Hey guys, just want to remind you that year-round we have amazing Mr. Ballin merch available all the time. It does not sell out. It's called Ballin Basics. You can get it at shopmrballin.com. These are different than the unique drops we do periodically. Ballin Basics, again, available 24/7, are things like our skeleton hoodie and t-shirt, our flannel blanket, all the stickers we have. There's a bunch of cool stuff, and it's available right now at shopmrballin.com. All year, you can get this stuff, some great stuff. So if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious, you don't gotta wait for the seasonal drops. You can go right now and get anything you want at shopmrballin.com. Year-round, it's available. Ballin Basics, check it out.
All in basic. Going down.
Around 1:30 p.m. on January 4th, 2020, a 25-year-old woman named Stav Harari and her boyfriend, whose name was Dean Shoshani, looked out the window of their apartment, which was located in Tel Aviv, Israel. Their apartment was located on the top floor of a brand new complex. And from that position, they had a great view of the whole neighborhood, at least normally. But today, their view was pretty much completely obscured because there was this horrible thunderstorm outside. Tons of rain and hail. I mean, they could barely look out their window. It was just like water and hail blasting against the glass. And so Stav and Dean, they look at each other, and it's pretty clear both of them are thinking the same thing. So this couple, they've been together since they were super young, and they really had just begun to transition into adulthood together. And so in this transitional time, they were just starting to make real money, but they really didn't have a lot of money. They'd put a lot of whatever they had into this apartment, and they also had recently purchased a car. And so the two of them, as they're looking at each other, they're thinking about that car, their investment. And with this huge storm out there, there's a chance the storm could damage that car. And they couldn't have that. They didn't have the money to fix it. Like, they needed that car. And so they both were like, you know what? Let's go down to the parking lot and move the car just to make sure it does not get damaged. So Dean grabbed the car keys, and then he and Stav left their apartment, went into the hallway, and walked down to the elevator. They pressed the down button, and then a moment later, the elevator car opened up. There was nobody inside. Stav and Dean stepped in. They hit the button that would bring them down to the parking lot, and then the doors closed, and the elevator began to go down. And as they were going down, Stav and Dean were quiet, just sort of waiting, anxious to see if their car had already been damaged. They didn't know. And so down it went, top floor again, so it's kind of a long ride, and they get really close to the floor they're waiting to get off at, when suddenly the car kind of comes to an abrupt stop. And for a second, both Stav and Dean are thinking, okay, well, I guess we must be at the floor. I mean, this is about where we should have stopped anyways. And the two of them are just staring at the doors, waiting for them to open up. But they don't. And after what felt like too long of a waiting period for the doors not to open, Stav reached out and hit the button that opens up the doors. But when she pressed the door open button, they didn't open. Nothing happened. At this point, Stav began to panic, and she turned to Dean and said, what do we do? We're stuck, we're trapped. But Dean said, don't worry about it. It's fine. It's probably just some small malfunction. It'll start working again soon, no big deal. But within seconds of that exchange, the two of them heard a very familiar sound. And when they looked at where the sound was coming from, they both began to scream. At the same time this was happening, another resident of this complex, a young man named Eli, happened to be nearby when he heard screaming. And he found out that the screaming was coming from the elevator shaft, and the doors were shut on his side. And so he runs to the doors and he listens, and very clearly, just beyond these doors had to be people who were stuck in the elevator, and they were screaming for help. And so instinctively, Eli grabbed the outside of the elevator and he tried to pry it open, but he just couldn't get them to budge. And the whole time, Staub and Dean on the inside are freaking out, screaming, pleading with someone to get them out. And so Eli, he turns and starts yelling for other people who were also nearby to come over and help. And before long, there was a group of guys over at the elevator doing everything they could with Eli to pry this thing open, but they just couldn't. And the whole time, Staub and Dean are inside sounding more and more desperate. And so Eli finally pulled out his phone and called the emergency services line. However, despite Eli pretty quickly alerting the authorities about this, ongoing crisis here, this elevator issue, it would take over an hour and a half for first responders to finally arrive to the apartment building because of this treacherous storm. There were loads of other problems in the city. But when they finally arrived at Staub and Dean's apartment and they got to the elevator, it was already too late. It would turn out, after Staub and Dean got stuck in the elevator and they're hitting the button, waiting for it to open, but nothing's happening, well, that familiar sound they heard was water rushing into the elevator.
No.
They looked down and saw water filling up this space that they can't get out of. And they began to panic and scream and beat on the doors as the water level slowly continued to rise because their parking lot was not outside. It was underground. And the big risk to anybody who parked in this lot is during big storms, this lot was known to flood.
Damn.
And so the couple had gone down to move their car to avoid flooding, not to avoid hail damage. But where this elevator car had stopped was underground. And so the parking lot did begin to flood, and that water found its way into the actual elevator car. And so Eli and those other people who were nearby who went over to the elevator and tried to open it, they were also standing in water. They were very well aware of the fact that if they couldn't open these doors, Staub and Dean are going to drown. And Eli, he didn't call the emergency services line once and call it good. He called 16 times because he's watching as the water is rising and rising and no one's shown up yet. And so eventually, Eli and the others, they had to abandon the elevator and basically swim out of the parking garage as they're listening to the sound of two people, Staub and Dean, still trapped inside of the elevator car. And so as they swam out of the parking garage and no first responders arrived, they knew what had happened. Clearly, they were going to drown. And so they listened to those screams until they stopped. And then finally, first responders showed up. And when they got there, they literally had to use scuba equipment to dive down the elevator shaft, which by this point was totally submerged. And then when they reached the car, they had to cut a hole in the ceiling. And then they pulled Staub and Dean out. And even though they rushed them to the hospital, unfortunately, they both had already died.
Damn. Oh man, that right there is super scary, man. Getting trapped in the elevator during a flood.
On the evening of July 2nd, 1993, a 49-year-old politician named Maslin Idris paced around the living room inside of his home, which was located in a suburb of Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Maslin was feeling very anxious because tonight, in his home, he was going to have a very important meeting. So Maslin was already a very successful politician. He was a state assemblyman, which is sort of like a state congressperson. But what he really coveted, the thing he wanted more than anything else in his political career, was to become the state's Menteri Besar, which is sort of like being the state's governor. But to get this role, Maslin had to be appointed. And realistically, he didn't know if that was going to happen. And that was in part because recently he had felt like his political power was sort of, slipping away from him. And on top of that, he was getting older and he sort of felt like his popularity was waning too. And so he felt like, in order for me to get appointed to become the state's Menteri Besar, I really need to find a unique way to reclaim that political power and popularity. And that was going to be the central focus of the big meeting at his house that night. So Maslin continued to pace around, anxiously checking his watch, waiting for these people to show up. And then sure enough, late that night, he heard a knock on the door. And he hustled over to the door and he made sure he looked okay. And then he opened it up. And standing in the hallway is this unbelievably beautiful woman who's flanked by these two men that he didn't know. And immediately, Maslin is just completely drawn to this woman. She had long, dark hair, this huge smile, and her eyes. They sucked him in. It was like she was, hypnotizing him or something. She really looked like a celebrity, at least as Maslin imagined celebrities look up close. This woman's name was Mona Fandey. And actually, to some degree, she was a celebrity. Back in the 1980s, she had released a pop music album that had been very popular all over Malaysia, and so she was like kind of famous in Malaysia. Now, in the early 1990s, Mona was done singing, that part of her life was over, but she had launched this brand new second career post-music that, to some people, it seemed like that actually made her more notable and more famous than her singing had. These days, Mona was a highly sought-after professional shaman. So in Malaysia at this time, shamanism was pretty popular and mainstream. Shamans were these people who claimed to have supernatural powers. They could heal people and bring them prosperity. And so it wasn't uncommon for the really well-known shamans to be called upon by very powerful people, like, politicians, let's say, to sort of leverage their powers to increase their clout and their influence. And so Maslin saw Mona, who at the time was arguably the most famous shaman in the entire country. He saw her as his meal ticket. She was going to be the way that he reclaimed the power he needed so he could be appointed as the state's Menteri Besar. And so Maslin very excitedly welcomed Mona and the two men, who were her husband and her assistant, into his home. And, even though Maslin had expected to see Mona tonight, he knew she was the one who'd be performing this ritual tonight, he still couldn't help but feel totally starstruck by her. And so as a result, he had a lot of nervous energy, and he began sort of like rapid firing, asking her questions about, how quickly will I see results, and how's this gonna go, and how successful are these things really? And Mona, as she's just looking at him and smiling, she just eventually reaches out as he's talking and just puts her hand on his shoulder and says, "It's okay. Why don't you show my husband and my assistant where the room is, where the space is that we're going to be doing this ritual tonight?" And at this, Maslin just totally shut up, and he nodded. He sort of got the hint that he was sort of being too much here. And he led them into this other room that he had cleared out for tonight. There was nothing on the ground. It was like a vacant room in his house. And right away, the assistant, he began spreading flower petals all over the ground, while Maslin began speaking to Mona's husband to work out payment details. This was not a free thing that he was getting. It was going to cost him the equivalent of tens of thousands of US dollars to get what he wanted here, to gain his power back. But Maslin didn't really care about how much this cost in money, because to him, it was absolutely worth it. And so once the payment details were handled, and Maslin was, ready, and the assistant had finished putting all the flower petals out, Mona walked over and told Maslin to come with her. And so he followed Mona, and they went into the ritual room that again is covered with flower petals, and she told Maslin to lay down on his back in the middle of the room. So he did that. He laid down, and he's looking up at Mona, and her assistant and her husband are off in the background. And Mona's got that big, dazzling smile, and she's staring right at him. She says, "Close your eyes and clear your mind. And all I want you to do is just focus on your desires for the future. What riches do you want to come to you? And focus solely on those." And so Maslin did this. In his mind's eye, he pictured himself becoming more politically powerful and more popular and landing the job of his dreams, and he's sort of narrating what he's saying out loud, and Mona's telling him, good, keep going, keep picturing those things. And then at some point she's like, "Look, I want you to picture riches raining down from the sky on you, sort of symbolizing you getting these things that you want." And so Maslin did that, and he began picturing the gold and the silver falling from the sky, landing on him, and he's narrating what he's feeling and seeing, and at some point he was so fixated on this idea of riches coming from the sky that he swore he could literally feel the gold and silver actually hitting his body. And at that point, when he was actually feeling something, is when the ritual was done. A little over a year later, on September 12th, 1994, the famous shaman, Mona Fandey, glided her way through a crowd of photographers on a street just outside of Kuala Lumpur. Mona was dressed to the nines. She had red lipstick on, her hair was all styled up, she had beautiful clothes on, and as she maneuvered through the crowd, she sort of feigned like she didn't want the attention, but she totally did. So it would turn out the ritual that she had performed on Maslin a year earlier had made Maslin incredibly famous. And in turn, it had made Mona even more famous than she already was. And so the paparazzi, they were desperate to get a photo of her because of her unbelievable fame. And for Mona, even though she acted like what she really cared about was being a shaman and helping people achieve their dreams and to heal and gain in prosperity, even though that's what she would say, the truth was, ever since she had had that big hit, that pop music album that had launched her into the stratosphere, ever since then, she had been chasing fame, and now she had really nailed it. I mean, she was like an icon in Malaysia. And so, as she maneuvered past the paparazzi and everyone's clamoring to get her attention and to get her photo, she thought to herself, my plan has worked perfectly. Except it's important to understand that, Mona wasn't really famous as much as she was infamous. And it really stemmed from that ritual she performed on Maslin. Because what she did to Maslin is she actually just ritualistically executed him. Except it would turn out Maslin wasn't even her first victim. He was her 8th victim, at least as far as we know.
What?
And she just got caught after she killed Maslin. When Maslin was laying in that room and the ritual's going on and he's being told to picture all these, gold coins and silver bars raining down on him, well, while he was doing that, and critically, he had his eyes closed, Mona grabbed an axe, raised it up, and brought it down into the middle of his chest. And so this ritual murder was designed to lead to somebody getting more power and more fame, except that person was not really Maslin, it was Mona. I mean, Maslin did become extremely well known for being a victim of Mona, but it was Mona who suddenly was the talk of the entire country.
Wait,
I mean,
what?
she was all over the news, and she was beautiful. And so it's like this crazy dichotomy of this unbelievably attractive woman who's also a serial killer. I mean, this is the stuff that just makes the news over and over and over again, and Mona loved it. And so when Mona was walking past that crowd of paparazzi and they're all taking photos of her, that was actually her walking to her murder trial. Every day, she would basically treat that walk up the steps to her murder trial as like her personal red carpet with all the paparazzi taking her photo.
No.
She'd dress up in these lavish outfits and smile for the cameras on her way to be tried for murder. And then ultimately, she was convicted of it and sentenced to death. But she was totally unfazed because for her, again, it was all about gaining this incredible notoriety, and she had succeeded. It was like the ultimate shaman move, and she had done it. On the day of Mona's actual execution, she was going to be hanged along with her assistant and husband. They too were found guilty. On her walk to the gallows, we have all these reporters and all these photographers, and she's still flashing smiles and treating it again like it's her own personal movie premiere. I mean, she didn't care at all that she's literally about to be killed. And then literally her final words as the noose is being put around her neck were, "I'll never die."
Wow. Do you know how like gone you have to be in the head to be smiling and stuff as you about to get taken out? Like, I always trip out on how much like how people choose to live their life. How you could do so many good things, but you choose to do evil. Like, I, stomach is growling. But man, that was insane. Just the smiling and stuff. Hey man, appreciate y'all coming over and watching. These were some hell of a stories, man. That first one still tripped me out that them brothers. I know people got people who really look alike, but man, I mean, my goodness, they really, I wonder how if they continue to hang out and stuff like that. But hey, again, appreciate you guys coming over and watching. Peace out.